Call this meeting to order at 6:02. If you're ready, take a look at the minutes. Have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion made by Mr. Second. Mr. Perry. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, next item, discussion of election day results. Do you have anything in particular you want to?
No, I just thought it was, there should be some acknowledgement of what's happening around us. I'm sure everybody saw it. Chittenden Central passed their articles, and it's subject to the 30-day period when people could ask for a recount and so, not recount, but a revote, reconsideration. So it'll sit for a month before, although the governor, I think, was over there yesterday. Was it today? Yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah, they had a big celebration thing, but there's still that month. But it was a very strong vote in Essex and Essex Junction, which is nothing short of astounding given their long history of not being able to come together. But what's really astounding is that Westford voted to give up choice, which is pretty unprecedented. I mean, I don't know of any towns that have chosen to give up choice because of the compelling case that they made. So that was that. Elmore in Morrisville went down by a handful of votes in one and barely passed in Morrisville, but because it didn't pass in Elmore, it didn't pass. And that would have required Elmore to give up high school choice as well. Actually, yes, I think it's just 7 to 12 choice. So that one did not succeed. And Elmore, I think, is the smallest school in the state. It's a one-room schoolhouse that only serves grades 1 to 3. Their kindergartners go to Morrisville, and their grade 4 to 12 are choice, and they only serve kids 1 to 3. But anyway, that one did not succeed. Anybody have any comments or questions about any of that?
I just have a question on choice. So we have students now from the high school that get a chance to go to Mount Aid or Middlebury.
Yes.
No, state.
What?
Anywhere in the state. They can go to
All right, well, they're going to Mount Aid, the Middlebury, because of transfer.
or CBU.
Is that, well, my question is that going to end?
No.
No, okay.
The state law about choice remains. There was no change in this bill, so there will still be that program that will allow kids that kind of choice. And as you know, if there's a single district, you can choose to manage choice however you want to within the new district. But there's nothing about the law that changes any of the rest of it. Yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry. That was it.
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. So it's now November 11th, which is hard to believe. Happy Veterans Day. Any vets here at the table? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's like these holidays that we've created as a country where it's a holiday for some people and not for most people, and people are confused about when it is and what it is, but that's one at least I think people have focused on a bit. So it's already November 11th, and it's about 2 months from now that you'll be taking your final vote on whatever you decide to do. So time's really cranking up here. So we're going to tonight jump into the work at hand and try to wrestle with a number of concrete issues that need to be decided in order to go into draft articles. The first thing I wanted to suggest before we get into the process we'll use tonight, I want you, if you take out the schedule was modified after the last meeting, and just make sure folks are keyed into the changes. I know some people were out of the offshore somewhere. Is Cheryl back, or is she's still not back? She's back, okay. All right, she may show up. So the changes that we made, we're having the meeting tonight. We have a meeting next week, which is on a Tuesday night, the 17th. There's a community forum in Addison on December 1st, and I'm assuming, Joanne, that you and the Communications Committee will handle the letting people know about that. We will have a study committee on December 8th, and I would hope I'm hoping that on the 17th you will have some beginning of some narrative to look at, or before that, so that you can begin to get a sense of how language might look on a report, so that you can work it over or change it or give instructions about it. By December 8th, hopefully we'll be in a better position to have more of it written. December 14th is a community forum in Ferrisburg, and the hope would be by that time that members of this committee can present to the broader communities the gist of what will be in the proposed articles and the main case that's been made relative to this, which of course we're still in the process of making. But that by December 14th, this should not be sort of a blue sky thing. It should be presenting to the public what the thinking is to date, asking them to comment, and then over the course of the next week, there will need to be a lot of work done on doing further adjustments to whatever you've done, because it's getting to the point where we need to at least run run a version by the Agency of Education, so that they can begin to engage with what's being proposed, especially if there's anything that's unusual. And there's a couple things we've talked about that haven't been usual fare for them. So any curveballs, they need some time to do their legal analysis. You have a carousel meeting for all your boards on December 16th, which is Wednesday of that week. One of the things that's required in Act 156, which is not, there are a lot of questions about which of these many laws apply to this particular process, because you're seeking Act 46 accelerated merger incentives. But my feeling about, in terms of guidance that I would give you, is you're better off just to cover the bases and not sort of leave open opportunities for somebody to say, well, you should have done this or that. One of the things that's required in the process under Act 156 is review and comment by the 4 boards. So when the report, the hope will be that by the first couple weeks of December, you'll begin to see some draft reports. We'll do work on those in the committee. You'll be sharing them, the gist of it, with the community forum on the 14th, get some feedback, do some redrafting, and the hope would be on the night of December 16th. So you can handwrite that in, we'll put it in the next version. The night of December 16th, this committee can do some quick presentation to your full boards, the 4 boards. And then in their meetings, they will be given the opportunity, they being you plus your colleagues, will be given the opportunity to comment in any way you want to on what this committee has done. That work has to be taken into account for that feedback you get from your boards will be taken into account for a last shot at it on the 21st of December. My understanding is on the 5th of January, Joanne will work with you around some vehicle, because it's too late for a full meeting. I mean, by that time we'll have had several shots at narrative, but this committee will need to take its final vote of approval on whatever you've agreed upon on the 5th. But it won't be like a 2-hour meeting. The assumption would be we would get the final version out to you. You will have seen it many times. If there it would be more if there's an error or we missed something or there's typos or we left out a section, but we can't be starting new conversations on January 5th.
Meeting that night for one of the boards.
The hope would be by that time it's just
Right.
it's a quick cleanup and a quick vote, and we'll figure out how to
manage that.
schedule it and manage it, and if you want to put it in with something else, whatever you need to do.
Okay.
And then we can talk about public information meetings later. Any other questions about the schedule? Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
So, so when we first agreed to those dates, those all looked great, and then last week, I got a notice that Virgin's concert is on the night of December 8th. I don't know if there are any other conflicts that have come up other than that one date, but if possible, if we could make an adjustment to that.
We could meet in the back of the auditorium.
There you go. Yeah.
That's the elementary school.
Correct.
It's the elementary school.
What time is their concert?
6 o'clock, I believe.
So do you want to change that date? I mean, that will be a very important, that week will be an important week to trying to get this thing done. So is there a desire to, I mean, obviously, it needs to be addressed. What's your preference?
8th is a Tuesday, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Any night but Friday.
That date's okay for me, because we're only having one meeting in December on the 15th.
The 8th is the day
So the
in
8th works.
question.
The
8th is okay for me.
So
Um,
9th?
Wednesday the 9th?
There's some kind of band concert, my calendar tells me, on the 9th.
Do they start
10th.
later?
The
What time do
7th.
they start? I don't know.
Does the 10th look bad for anybody?
10th. 10th, going once, twice?
Looks
10th
good.
10th versus the 7th? Thursday
Versus the
10th?
8th,
Turn the 8th.
instead of the 8th.
Well, instead of the 8th, I was also, you didn't talk about this Monday the 7th, but if you'd rather.
Do we know the high school, middle school concert schedule too? Because I feel like we're just going to end up with.
Gloria, can are
Battling
those on the
concerts.
website yet?
Kinda looking at it.
Yeah.
The last time we talked
I'll
about
tell you
this.
what, let's do a tentative agreement and she can continue to double check.
On the 10th.
Yeah, it's really that week. Is there anything else that week? So why don't we tentatively say the 10th and that's same time, same place. All right.
Your concerts are December 7th and 9th.
Oh, good, so we stayed away from the 7th, that's good. We knew it all along. All right, so the 10th will be the meeting instead of the 8th. Okay, thank you. So the approach tonight, we're going to talk, my proposal is to try to talk about 5 items and to take about 15 minutes max on each one and try to wrestle it to the point where either we've reached consensus or we've identified that, in fact, some additional information needs to be gathered. Yes, so we'll either have it basically done, or we'll have some research and we'll come back with it the next time. If we can agree on language, that's fine, but because that all takes way too long sometimes, the main thing is that we will agree on principles that will go into it, and then just as I did from the last meeting, we'll do a draft based on the principles that you agree to, and then you can look at and approve the language at the next meeting. So that's basically what we're trying to do. Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
This is just more of a clarification based on other outside conversations I've had and just information that came up at the last meeting about the incentives and money and all that type of stuff. We were charged to look forward, have this committee and move towards those accelerated incentives.
Yes.
Would there be, or could there be a point where this board determines that it would be appropriate to have more time and not take that incentive?
You ultimately are going to need to decide, are we going forward with a recommendation? You will have to, that will need to be, what we're doing really, because of the compressed time frame, is on the assumption that if you're going to go for the accelerated incentives, you sort of have to go, you have to
Right.
develop, get the answers to these questions. Next week, the focus is going to be on the educational reason to do this. I mean, that's what we're going to talk about, and Joanne will be heading that up, and there'll be a variety of information that'll be presented, and there'll be the opportunity for you all to talk about the pros and cons of doing that. But this conversation is all about, if you're going to recommend to go forward, then what should go into the articles.
Mhm.
But no, that decision, you all have not yet made that final decision as to whether you're going forward. So I know it's a little herky-jerky. We had some money stuff last time. We're doing articles today. We'll do educational benefits next time. We'll begin to draft up some information. And then it all has to come together that early part of December.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on, I'm sorry, I wasn't
Yeah.
at the last meeting. So the money argument, is that over and done with, or is that?
No.
I mean, I feel like it's missing from the articles and the whole argument. If it's about a financial incentive, then we need to really detail that.
So just a couple things. First of all, we've, and I don't think I have that for tonight, we've done an outline of what the full report needs to look like. The report needs to address the three big goal areas of the law, which are equity and quality of education, which is, again, what the focal point will be for next time. Secondly, it's both there's language in the bill about the ability to manage at a time of shrinking enrollment, being able to manage staffing levels. There's a bunch of stuff about managing a school district on into the future in a reasonable fashion. And there's something about being able to deliver education at a cost that taxpayers value, is what it says, which is a little bit of a convoluted language. But the point is, we need to address the overall financial picture. There was some information presented last week which basically says, and I will quickly summarize just because you weren't here, but we're going to need more time to talk about that in the next couple of meetings. But the gist of it was, there is some benefit financially to proceeding with the accelerated incentives. Basically, the 10-cent, the immediate tax benefits will have benefit. There's not dramatic savings in the short run. And that's largely because you are already so unified in so many ways that it's not like Essex Junction and Essex Town, which are going from one superintendent's office from 2 to 1. There's obvious savings when you do that kind of thing, but that process was done a long time ago. But we will come back to the case about finances next time. But hopefully, did you get any of the information?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so Ed is continuing to work on all of that, and we will come back to that at a later meeting. Yeah. But tonight was really to try to keep moving forward the discussion about some of the technical aspects of articles, just because that's got to get done if you're going to go forward. Okay, so we will come back to that. So if you would take out the articles that you've got, and the draft, this is a redraft of the articles from last, it's a redraft from the last time. Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing was done on them, I don't believe, since last time. Article 6 we're going to talk about tonight. Article 7. Article 8, Chris Leopold does not believe it's pertinent any longer, so we'll probably be removing that. Article 9 is the one we dealt with the last time when we came up with the proposal for board membership. And you'll see that italicized language, board membership will be recalculated following each decennial census. We will, when we get to the point of actually adopting articles, we can revisit that. But there was interest the last time we met about building in the fact that you are in a bit of a dynamic area. You don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. And there ought to be some provision that says somebody looks at it. What's still not clear to me is how that gets recalculated and the mechanics of it, we should probably build those mechanics in. So I don't know whether it's something that has to go back to the electorate or whether it's something the board can vote on. I've heard two different opinions about that, but we'll get that clear. So that's what we did the last time. I took that and took the liberty of drafting Article 10. And Article 10, actually, I took straight out of your last proposal, which was the distribution, you're staggering the first terms that people get elected to. But in drafting Article 10, you'll see language at the bottom of the page that talks about the term of office going 2, 3, or 4 years. And what was in the listing the last time, what was in the report the last time was 1-year terms, 2-year terms, and 3-year terms. We're working again with Chris on that sort of disconnect, because I think the intent was, and it happens to be a challenge for you all, because this vote will be being taken on the day of your annual meeting. So the second annual meeting would be 2018. So in other words, if somebody runs for a 1-year term, it's actually not a 1-year term. It's a 2-year term because of the way this is described. So we'll get the language straight, but I think what will be being proposed is that in the first time people put their petitions in, they would be either seeking a 2-year, or 3-year, or a 4-year term. In the future, they will all be 3-year terms, but in the first time around, so that it gives you that continuity, because the district doesn't even exist. By the time you come to the town meeting the following year, the district doesn't exist yet. So it makes sure you're not electing people before you even have a district. Okay. So that's what that is, Article 10. 11, 12. 11 and 12 were basically what was there the last time. Article 13, there were two things we talked about. One was Australian ballot. There was agreement on recommending that votes for the new district on public questions and the budget would be by Australian ballot. And that was it. And then there's some list of other things that we will be considering. And tonight I'm proposing that we talk about the school closure issue and the school council's concept. And the next time we can talk about the other end. Questions, comments? Okay, seeing nothing. So what we're going to do is let's take these one at a time. And I distributed the last time language from the most recent 3 proposals that have gone to the state board. We don't need to recreate the wheel all the time. But what they have proposed is not necessarily what you have to propose. So the question will be, did you see anything in these proposals on the first issue of indebtedness and assets, basically, that you think we should just take their language, or are there other principles or concepts that we ought to start putting up here that should go into our draft? And if you want to, I did all the cross-referencing here, which I do. So, Chittenden East, it's section 6 and 7. And in Elmore Morrisville, it's section 6. And then in the assets thing, it's, well, it's 6, 7, and 6 is the reference point if you have those drafts that were sent out, or that were handed out the last meeting. So is there anybody that wants to suggest how we manage those? Did you like one of these?
I would like to speak to one of them, and I'm trying to locate it, but one spoke directly. We had conversation about special funds for, say, the music program.
Yes.
There was one that spoke specifically to that the new board would be in charge of those funds, and it would be allocated to stay with those programs. They couldn't use it for other areas, and I think that resolves that issue.
language in one of these
Absolutely,
I
yes.
believe that was in Morristown, Elmore.
Yeah, that's Article 6C.
Yeah. In Elmore. So
In Elmore.
take a look at Elmore 6C. Let's just take a. So that's on page 7. Specified funds. Okay. Elmore and Morrisville school districts will transfer to the new school district any pre-existing school district-specific endowments or other restricted accounts, scholarship funds, or like accounts held by school districts prior to June 30th, 2016 that have specified conditions of use will be used in accordance with said provisions. So in other words, whatever the ground rules are prior to the creation of the, well, this says prior to, yep, we can choose the date. We could, I assume, prior to the creation of the new school district would be carried over for their original intent. Does that language, let's start with that whole question. Does that work for people?
So basically, it stays the same.
The ownership would be with the
Stay
district.
with the individual schools?
Would be with the district, however, the use would be restricted to the original use.
I think it even covers it better in the paragraph above, 6B, about midway through. It says, in addition, reserve funds identified for specific purposes will be transferred to the Elmore-Morristown Unified Union District and will be applied for said purpose unless otherwise determined throughout the appropriate legal procedures. So again, it speaks to, they stay to those funds and they maintain there and can't get reallocated.
Does that mean it's for that same school or for the same purpose, but maybe at a different school?
I interpreted it as the same school,
I would too.
For the same
but I think
purpose?
we should write that in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've got maybe two different things we're talking about. One is sort of on the books funds that are like restricted funds of the district. And the other is the off the books, like the PTO and the other, I don't want to say slush funds, but you know what I'm talking about, the ones that aren't part of the budget. You have Friends of Music.
Friends of Music.
So
yes,
they're kind of two separate things.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, if they need to be addressed separately, maybe.
Yeah, that's a
But it
good
needs
point.
to be
I have one
addressed because
example,
it's,
though.
I mean, there won't be a high school, it's gonna be one school, just different buildings, so it
One
does need to be
district, but it's,
addressed.
the Friends of Music funds would stay with the high school.
But there is no high school, it's a K through 12 district.
Okay.
So we have to address it with
Well,
language.
although the Friends of Music has always been 7 through 12, so
Yeah.
you could say
Yeah.
that Friends of Music is a 7 through 12 music
Right.
program
Right.
Sure.
organization.
Yeah.
And Ferrisburg PTO is
Yep.
K through 6, Ferrisburg, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for instance, Ferrisburg has an Odyssey of the Mind. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Odyssey of the Mind, but, and they had a team there like 6, 7 years ago. And they competed for a while, raised money. There's still money sitting at Ferrisburg in that fund. Virgins sent a team last year, I believe, in the elementary school to the States. And I believe that they tried to get their hands on some of that money because it's just been sitting there since my kids left elementary school, which was 6 or 7 years ago. And they weren't able to use it. So in that case, there's an instance where there's funds for this program in one school, and it seems like Virgins would be,
It also
So that's just a
seems-
specific situation.
But that specific situation, I think, actually speaks very well to our intended purpose. If there's a kid, one kid in Ferrisburg, and say 2 kids in Addison that both want to do Odyssey of Their Mind, and there's a team in Virgins, there's no reason they can't join that team.
Right.
So
Right.
we could,
But that's not what this says,
So,
quite.
But we could say that its intended purpose is for Odyssey of the Mind. And in
True.
that case, it's being done.
But then there's other accounts that don't
Right.
fall into that
So we
parameter.
have to make sure
So
that the
it's-
accounts
okay,
are
so
specified.
there's a few, we gotta slice and dice this issue. Go ahead, Mel.
I think what we need is a sheet of paper that has every one of these funds listed on it, all right? And also, when you say Friends of Music, the question that pops up in my mind, is Friends of Music a 501c3 nonprofit, or is it an affiliate fund of the schools? And because really, if it's a 501c3, that money doesn't go anywhere, all right? It's a separate corporation. So I think we need to fully understand all of these funds and whether or not they potentially are under a unified jurisdiction or not.
I doubt any of them are 501c3 just because it's a lot of work to go through that, and they're under the umbrella of the school,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's.
baseball team had they got out of Booster Club, created their own fund. So you think that they're all these funds are all using the school's taxpayer identification number?
Probably not all of them, the
Joanne?
PTOs aren't, but.
Joanne, I know you and I had this discussion previously. Have you had a chance to look at any of these, or what about this idea?
Yeah, we have begun to build a list of all the funds, and I do believe that they are under the schools. It does take a lot to go through the process of 501c. I did not bring what we have started in terms of that list tonight. Yeah.
So, go ahead.
But in terms of the question indebtedness, does that mean amount owed? So
Yeah,
the
we'll come back
amount.
to the indebtedness. I mean, there's some big issues about the overall indebtedness of a school district. I assume at this point what we're talking about is special funds that are kind of out of the big budget.
And so this would be included in Article 6, all
You
funds?
we could do a piece of Article 6 that would clarify how you're going to deal with special funds. That's in essence what we're doing right now. So it sounds like there's three ideas I heard, three concepts that could be built in. If there's a restriction for purpose, you could agree that that purpose would be protected, but not necessarily the geography. In other words, the Odyssey of the Mind could be an Odyssey of the Mind fund.
Yeah.
Or if in fact the fund was created with a location that somebody gave the Addison Elementary School an endowment to fund kids from Addison for a certain thing, that the geography would be respected on into the future. If there's a 501c3 at some level, they're probably
Separate anyway.
freestanding.
It sounds like they're not,
Yeah.
but, relative to these special funds, when you say they're not part of the budget, are they part of the accounting? Are they part of they're audited?
They're audited, yes.
And I'm assuming if money leaves those funds, is it board decision and the treasurer signing off on that, or some of these have their own treasurer, or how's money go out of these things?
Well, the parent committee, for example, at Virgins, has takes in money from fundraising, like all schools, and including the talent show, and that all goes into the fund, and there's a checkbook. So among the group, there's a treasurer, there's a secretary, there's a chair, and so the group decides how to spend this money. How it gets reported out to the board, I don't know, but they have their own checkbook and, manage the funds themselves.
The PTOs are not school accounts, though. They're managed, that money's
Yeah.
managed separately, it doesn't go through your office.
So they may obtain a state of Vermont nonprofit status, not a federal 501c3, but they get their, if they're eligible,
Yeah.
because not everything is eligible, but if you fall under the eligibility to become a state nonprofit, you can get a federal ID number, and
Yeah, I think they all have
off you
those.
go. And if it's not, if that money is not commingled, if you will, with schools, it sounds like it's separate money. And
That's
I don't
true.
think, I think it'd be good to have that list, but I think just to clarify that all of these are really not part of, they just don't, because none of the school districts, the school district didn't apply to get that nonprofit, that state nonprofit status.
That's
A
correct.
group of people did.
There's three PTOs in our district. I don't know if does Addison have a PTO? So
Yes.
there's 4. And I know
And they exist on their own.
they're
Right.
registered with the Secretary of the State. They manage their own funds.
Yeah.
Into this. So I'm going to suggest for the next meeting, if Joanne, if you could do whatever to get the list so people just are aware of it. What I'm going to suggest maybe is you working with the business manager, try to draft something up that would speak to the respecting the purposes and/or geography of any specialized funds, but something that we can then sink our teeth into. But this needs a little more research. But it sounds like people are generally in agreement on those two principles. If it's very specific to a particular community with that intent, it gets protected. If it's for a purpose that really could apply to everybody and ought to apply to everybody, you could do that. And obviously, if it's somebody else's money.
But I think what Eugene is talking about is these capital funds that the schools have had a practice of putting money, going to the voters, having the voter act on very specific appropriations that go into a capital fund. And so in the case, I think that's what you're bringing up, Eugene, is that in the case of the town of Addison has currently, $312,000 in their capital fund for the Addison Central School, all right? And Ferrisburg has $800,000 for their school, and Virgins is in a deficit in their, or let's say they have $150 in their fund. I think what you're wanting to make sure is addressed is that the voters authorized to put that money for that building, and that capital fund can only be used. So those capital funds have to remain separate until they're exhausted.
This is an open question. I mean, this one is an open question. These things, I think we can manage it within it. But the bigger question of assets and liabilities globally is really critical. So,
I think that in the Elmore, when they're using the word reserve fund is a statutory term. Reserve funds have to be set up and approved by the voters. We're not talking about a special fund for some special purpose. These are voter-approved reserve funds.
I mean, I guess I would argue that's not wildly different than any other normal budget that happens. So the local town voters approve a budget towards computers, and that's, so in this plan, we're looking at saying, whatever, that town approved that certain budget with all that equipment, and it's now we're not going to have a computer that belongs to Addison, a computer that belongs to Ferrisburg. It's going to be a part of the district, or whatever our name is going to be. So I don't necessarily see those lines quite boxed in the same way that you do, I guess.
I was just trying to clarify what I think Eugene was bringing up.
But you could have a technology fund that had been building over the years that was voted on by the voters for a special purpose. If you reallocate that, that would go against the vote that was made. I don't know how many of those cases we have.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling is those, so if Addison, Virgins has, $10,000 that was allocated for just technology investment, then, and if this merger does go ahead, then I would say that the district doesn't contribute towards that, but exhausts it, and we aren't making any more contributions towards that.
Yeah.
So just to play out those capital funds, so if each school has a different amount, would there be any restrictions to allowing the overall board to borrow from one fund to another? So say, Virgins might say, hey, Addison, can we have some of your money to just tide us over? Is there a loan situation that would be set up, or what would there be restrictions from borrowing from one school to help another, even though it is restricted?
I think that the funds would become under the control of the unified district. They would be on the books or in the budget of the unified district. They would be, we're talking about where they would be allocated, reserved for a certain purpose in a certain school, but legally there won't be any entity in Virgins or Ferrisburg, for example, to control that money. So,
well, there might be a parent oversight committee at that school, the capital committee, who would be like, well, hey, that was our money, how come Virgins is using it? I mean, I can see where there might be some conflict.
Other thoughts? Okay, we're just going to try to get as many thoughts, and then we'll try to formulate this into a proposal. Go ahead.
To clarify, Mel, I was talking about originally the funds that were created for a specific purpose, but rereading Article 6B, it does speak clearly to reserve funds, which is a budgeted fund. So I just want to be clear on that. They were two separate things initially. There's language in several of these articles that speaks to fund balances and how they're handled in that one-year transition. And I don't see why we would deviate from that. And each school have their fund balances, and then after that new board takes control, it comes into a mutual and it gets dispersed out accordingly seen fit by that board. So it gives a year transition to tidy up what we need to do at our schools and do what we had set forth with that monies, and then it transfers.
Does any of our schools have any significant amount of money in these accounts? I don't think Ferrisburg has more than 20,000. We're talking about a how many $1 million budget? I mean, this is not to sound callous, but this is budget dust.
Are there sizable?
What's sizable?
What, I don't know.
In the
50,000
eye of the
or
beholder,
more.
does
10%
anybody
of
perceive
the
themselves
budget.
as having a sizable
Now you're testing me.
fund balance somewhere that's for a particular purpose?
I can't answer that for Addison, I don't know.
Okay, so you're not aware
We
of
have, there are some schools with more than 50,000.
more than 50,000?
In a capital.
So I would make
In a capital fund.
I would make I guess I'd put the issue a challenge. I think the question on this one, on sort of, because there's some people that owe money, there's some people that have some amount of money, although it doesn't sound like mega money. There, at some point, the new board becomes responsible to make sure that buildings are maintained, that education, there's equal education. If you had a special fund for computers that has $10,000 in it, and you got no money in your account for computers, this board has a responsibility to make sure that you provide an equal opportunity across the board, and you need to use the resources that are available to you. And it may be this year, in that first year, it may be that kids in some other town are going to benefit because there's a little bit of money a little more money in the pool. But next year you may need a roof, and you're going to, I mean, and when I say you, I'm talking about the historic you, because now it'll be all of you.
Us.
So it's us. So I think it's very important to respect very special things that were created for special purposes, and we need to debate those. I would caution you about getting too much into those nuances for other purposes, because the whole thing, there's going to be kids who live in particular towns are going to, or particular, will benefit at certain moments more, and others will benefit otherwise, and it's all going to be part of the same package. Anyway.
Isn't it part of unification to assume everybody's debt and also assume whatever funds you have to share?
It is, unless there's some extreme situation that's going to become a barrier, and you might need some kind of transition plan or whatever it might be. So, I mean, part of this is it needs to be informed by, if there's any other data, it might be something, Joanne, that you guys could take a look at, just to see if there's anything out there that this group should be sinking their teeth into, because it sounds like most of you don't know what you know is your own board, but not necessarily the whole picture.
I just want to make sure I understand. So for example, let's say Addison has a big capital fund that the voters have put money into over the years to take care of the Addison school building. Are we saying that, well, that'll just move into the Union District and benefit all the buildings? Or are we saying that that money probably ought to be used for the Addison school, because those are the people that put the money in and want to save it? And which is going to make a difference as to whether this is going to get support from people in Addison?
Right, how you word it to
Which is
provide
why you
those
need the data,
assurances.
because it's a
Yeah.
fine philosophical conversation, but if there really isn't any money, there's no reason to debate it. So I think that's why we need
There's money.
That's why we need to know how much money is there for what purpose.
And I don't have that this evening, but I shall get that
So
report.
if it's big,
I'll defer my question to
if
them.
it's big,
You said
then
it's
how much
more
it
than
we may need some
It is
kind
more
of.
than
That's
50,000.
So
enough
do you
to
think
talk about.
Addison residents would object to that? I'm just, folks from
Again, I
Addison,
think it would-
any idea?
In my opinion, would be dependent on how much money we're talking about.
But then there's also the question of we have to look at this as like a marriage. I mean,
Right.
if you get married and your car breaks, if your husband's saying, no, sorry, that's your car, then there's something a little wrong in the relationship, perhaps.
Yeah, but we're asking people to
More like a prenup.
get married without knowing who the partner is.
No, we get all the money, get all the
So, I mean-
information on the table.
So,
Wait, hold on a second, let's, Tracy, finish your comment, and then we'll go.
Put everything on the table, absolutely, get all the information, but if we go into this with the idea that we are we and they are they, then this unification is not a unification.
Well stated, Lori.
Well, the other piece is that, like you could come from it as, you don't know the pieces that are out there. but, you know, what about appraising the properties themselves and going to each of the buildings and say, okay, this roof is gonna need to be fixed in 3 years. This one's good to go for 10, you know, so then you'd be able to see where everybody's at. I mean, I don't know how you could go about doing that, though.
But you've made the point. The point is, you need to make sure that you're only trying to separate things, treat things specially if you feel like there's a legal obligation to treat them separately. Otherwise, that is exactly what you would need to do. Because they may have $100,000 in an account, but they also may need a roof faster than you'll need a roof, and then, so what's that about? You know, at some level, you're coming together and taking it all on together, and understanding that at some level, it's, over time, it will absolutely even out, because you're gonna make sure that all the kids get taken care of. But it is important to know what we're talking about.
But you gotta remember, the risk always exists that, let's say it's on the minds of the district to get rid of Addison School at some point, 5 years down the road. So if they don't allocate the monies to that school property, knowing they're gonna get rid of it, that's a concern for the Addison community. It's the car that doesn't get fixed because it's getting sold.
But you've got the board. They're not gonna not say they're not gonna give Addison a money or Ferrisburg a money or Virgins a
They
money.
wouldn't say it, of course not.
No, but you have,
I don't disagree with what you said, but I think that is going to go into a different article of property transitions and maintenance of those properties, where everything that I read in these other articles talks about closures and school transfers, but nothing says maintenance. Nothing's really spoke of maintenance, and I think it's very important that we outline that in our articles, that the new board is, we don't want to leave it for assumption that the new board is going to be happy with maintaining any school. We're going to put it in the articles that it has to be maintained to an adequate level and not to be left to depreciate in any sort of way. And it's black and white. There's no gray area, in my opinion. So the car can't not get fixed. But I think that's a different article.
That's your capital funds, right?
All right,
Than
so
what we're talking.
yeah,
currently.
I think so. And at some level, you've got to, whether you're running one school or whether you're running 6 schools or 7 schools, you have the same legal obligation to make sure that you're meeting all the standards,
Right.
you know, so on and so forth. So, but anyway, we'll come to that issue in a second. So what I'm going to suggest then is we will get the details on it, special activity funds. Joanne will help us draft something up, so you'll have it the next time on special funds. The big issue of assets and indebtedness and all of that, whether there's special funds we need to get a handle on, are there some realities there that you're going to have to deal with in this or not? Because I don't hear a lot of sort of legally binding big things, but we need to know it. And short of that, in this one, is there general sense that we shouldn't try to end up with a menu of a lot of special, open the door on a lot of special treatment unless there's something compelling? And we'll look to see if there's something compelling next time. Okay. Then let's move on to the question of the disposition of real property. And this isn't the question of school closure. Obviously, it's related to school closure because that's why you would probably be, you may be disposing of property. But the question, this is a process question of what happens if you don't use some piece of property that you start off with and you decide to dispose of it, who gets it and for how much money. And I think all of these include pretty much the same kind of provision. Maybe with some twists, and I don't know if somebody saw something they particularly like. It's in Chittenden East and Elmore, it's section 7, or Article 7, and in Chittenden Central, it's Article 8.
Is that Mount Mansfield? Is that Chittenden?
Yeah, that's Chittenden East. That would be number, so Article 7.
Yeah, I like that one.
You like theirs?
I do.
So if you go to page 9 of the Chittenden East articles, if you haven't had a chance to read it, why don't you just take a second to look it over and see if there's anything about it that you like or that you have serious concerns about. And again, this would be informed by anything we learn in the next week about special whatevers. So they have their general statement, which is the first 3 paragraphs, and then they get into the special circumstances of Underhill with the library and so on and so forth. So I don't know if there are special circumstances in this SU that would need to be considered in the next week. Or if again, we're looking for concepts, not language, and we'll draft language. If those first 3 paragraphs capture the essence of what you'd want to do, we can turn it into language for next week.
How would you sell a Union Elementary School for $1 back to the town if 3 towns own it? Isn't that what it's saying here?
Good point, because it does say town in which it is located.
No, you're not supposed to ask hard questions.
I know,
Let's just see, did they talk about the Mount Mansfield Union High School in here?
Yeah, I think they say the Union High School building would go back to the Union District, which is the same. In this case, we've got a legacy Union Elementary District that's not in existence anymore, and not a municipality either.
I'm looking for reference in here to Mount Mansfield Union High School. Is that mentioned in here? Did somebody see it?
No, I guess I mentioned all the elementary schools, which is why I like the language.
It doesn't specifically say the Union High School, just the elementary schools.
Well, in the event that, well, which one is this? I'm gonna yeah. The Union District determines that any of the real property conveyed to it by the Mount Mansfield Union District is unnecessary. That shall sell the property
There it is.
as established by the Union District Board of School Directors. So if it's a union school, then it gets sold by the union
By the
district, and
new-
if it's
by
a
the
town
new
school,
district.
it gets sold back to the town.
Got it.
It's sold by the town, but if it's a union elementary school going into the bigger union, it doesn't, we don't know what to do.
You get 50 cents to each.
So it is here. It's, and then, so your question is on the Virgins Elementary School. That may be one we.
Because it's not owned by all the members of this new
Right.
district.
Yeah, this is, obviously,
Oh.
it's,
Isn't that just a matter of wording?
yeah.
I don't want any part of Virginia Union Elementary School. Money-wise, or fine, we didn't put anything to it. Nor do I
agree.
anticipate it ever going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But we do need to make sure that it's covered. So
Absolutely.
we'll come up, we can work with it. This is really more of a legal kind of question of what kind of language to put in here. So it sounds like, are people generally okay with the concepts that are in this section?
Yes.
As far as property.
I would like to just point out that one of them speaks to Article 8 in Essex Westford. It speaks to school real estate and personal property of the school, whereas none of the other ones speak of the personal property. I guess maybe I'd just like a little clarification. What's personal property? I would think we'd want to prevent any, again, not that I would assume this would ever happen, but any school being emptied out per se of everything that's in there and just left with an empty shell. We all know how insurance works, and when you lose everything, you have all this stuff inside your house. Your house is worth X, but everything in the house is worth 3 times as much. I'd like to see some sort of information that just speaks to the contents of the property. I see it
Do you-
potentially as
do
a
you
sticking
like-
point.
Do you like this reference to personal property, or would you prefer to see it like that? Or do you want to do something different?
It really just opened the question that one spoke to personal property and none of the others did.
Yep.
And I see that as a potential sticking point if it's to come up.
All right, good observation. Anybody got any insights into that one? Because again, I'll contact Chittenden Central and find out what their thinking was in adding that, and if there was significance to it, we can also run this by Chris. Anybody got any other opinions about that issue?
I think it'd be tough to restrict movement of personal property once you form the union. Because then you're saying, well, whose desk is this and whose computer is this? We can't move this to the other building because that gets tricky.
No, I completely agree. We come together as a union, we're here to support the kids. And I'm not saying that, I just think maybe some of the people that we need to support us could get stuck on that. And I want to get it out and vet it out and how, in the best manner so we can get the support of everybody to pass this thing.
I will,
Good question.
I'll find out why they
What
put
personal
that in there,
property is,
because
right.
there was there was some kind of conversation that went on, obviously, to add that in, so. Okay. So we've got a basis, I think, to do some drafting on that one. School closures, guidelines, and parameters. Now, most of these include reference to the what ifs or the wherefores or how things happen. But let's just put this one out there, because obviously this issue is always sensitive, and it's it was front and center in a lot of the conversations in the General Assembly about, to what degree do you protect schools, and what the what Act 156 provided for. Actually, I think it may have gone back to Act 153, was that a school district could not, I'm sorry, a school building could not be closed. If there was a merger, a school building could not be closed for 4 years without the approval of the town in which it was located. Now, the word closed wasn't defined, really. I mean, I assume it means shuttered, sold, disposed of, as opposed to the discussion of the use of a particular building. Did anybody see language in any of these that has application to your circumstances here? Let's just have a wide open discussion about it, but if you saw language you liked, it's a place to start.
I think it'd be important to start with language from Act 46 directly that says it's not the intent of this legislature to close schools.
Where are you? 700.
I'm just going off from memory
Yeah,
at this
good.
moment. And I'd like to keep that in perspective. I think everybody's rational, and there may come a time where, obviously Addison's the one on the hot seat, potentially. There may come a time where that could be a real possibility. I think we should put in our articles maybe some contents of how that would happen or how it would look, but that's not directly, it's not for us to come up with what schools right today should close. It's up to the new board ultimately. And I think that's key in our articles, that we leave it up to the new board and not tie their hands. I think that we would be setting ourselves up for failure in multiple ways, potentially even failing our kids by not talking just Addison kids, but if we tie our hands and close schools out of the gate, we lose a campus already. And 5 years from now, who knows, maybe there'll be an influx of, I don't know, manufacturing in Addison, who knows, God only knows. But why would we do that out of the gate? Why would we set ourselves up for that? So
Population will grow.
it should grow. But just having the flexibility of another campus is huge in my mind.
So the two main points I heard you making, one is it is true that one of the stated purposes of the laws is to preserve small schools, or I don't have the language, but if you go back to your language that you've got in there, that was a specific intent because there was a belief that small schools could be kept open more likely if they're part of a larger system than if they're trying to go it alone in a time of declining enrollment. Again, without defining what does it mean to have a school open. I mean, it doesn't mean it has to look exactly the same grades or whatever, but the idea. So that was, so you're suggesting that that be in the language of this section, whatever section we talk about, relative to school closure. You're emphasizing that closure decisions should be made by a new board, obviously in the context of whatever's happening in the district and the money and the enrollment and so on and so forth. Well, I will double check on, we could double check it right now if we wanted to. Jeff, I don't know if you've got that, the four-year business, the four-year piece in the bill that says that a school district cannot be, a school building cannot be closed for those first 4 years. I don't know if you remember that. I don't know if you have your statute with you, but I was going to ask if you could.
No, it's 4.
Gloria's pretty good at that.
Yeah, if she could just track down what that language is, I've got it here if you want to. Gloria, but it would just be good to know what that says as we go through this. Any other language, any other issues or language that you see in any of these drafts?
So the ultimate goal is equality. One of the goals is equality. Is there anything we need to say about that when we look at assets and liabilities and properties, such as, things will be as is, or things will, then once we consider the assets of the different schools, we'll make sure that the other schools have the same kinds of assets like computers? Is there some kind of equality that has to be embedded in this information?
So you're back on the question of property. So there's both the question of the ownership of property, or the disposition of property. You're raising the question that actually was mentioned earlier, I think, by Eugene. Is there a commitment to facilities it won't be equity, I mean, it won't ever be exact equity, but is there an attention to equity in facilities? Is that what you're raising?
Right, and, whether it's appropriate or not. I mean, maybe it's not appropriate to make sure everybody has the same exact thing, but at the same time, if we're all in this together, maybe one campus might desire something that another campus has. So what's the obligation to make sure that they have that?
If somebody had, maybe if you have suggestions on what that might look like in an article, I'm going to put it down here as a concept, but.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just think as for constituents who we want to support this would speak to, the whole fairness issue. People, I think, will be sensitive to that.
I think it's important, however it gets communicated, I think it's very important to communicate to people that there is a commitment by a new district to make sure that that there's good facilities to support the education of all students. And it would be absolutely antithetical to the whole idea that you're trying to do here, to have a couple of great school buildings and one that's fallen into the lake. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
So it's important to make a statement. I don't know exactly where you put it, but I've got the idea here. Let's go back to the whole question of closure. Is there language that people would like to include about closure?
Go back to the Elmore Morristown Article 4, school facilities, second paragraph, again, midway through, speaks to the Morristown Unified Union District Board of Directors will continue to use all facilities existing on July 1st, 2016 for a minimum of 4 years, unless a majority vote of the electorate of the municipality agrees with a plan to close the facility. I'm not saying I like that or dislike that. It just speaks directly to the closure of school. In my notes, I made a note if you wanted to take it a step further to make it a majority vote in all 5 towns. So it's not just, it's got to be a majority across the board.
Well, I think this is where what Laura's looking for right now enters in. Because I believe that's straight out of the statute.
Is that?
Yeah, I think that's what I think the law says, following the creation of a new unified district, if the new board's desire is to close a building, it can only close, in order to close a building, literally close and dispose of a building, within the first 4 years, you have to have a vote of that community.
Yep.
Beyond that, there is no protection by that individual town. Beyond that, it's the decision of the aggregated, it would be the full aggregated vote of everybody
Sure.
to decide to close or open schools or build new schools or whatever.
Which makes makes sense entirely.
So you like some kind of specific language that captures the essence of the law.
Right.
I'd put a period after a minimum of 4 years,
Right.
right? And then don't worry about.
Well, that's, the law does say that, I mean, if you early on in the operation, if you decide that there's some great thing you can do educationally by doing something different with your facilities, you wouldn't, I mean, the whole purpose of the law is to say you may want to do that, but it requires a vote of the
Right.
involved
And
town.
that community has to vote to do it,
Right.
so.
But
But if you put a period in, then you've tied the hands of the school board. And
4 years.
But that's the law. I think you're going to say.
Well, it's been 15 years since we started talking about it, so.
Right.
4 years go by
4
pretty
years.
quick.
Yeah, 4 years goes by, yeah, Christine.
I'm just wondering how everybody feels about the minimum of 4 years. Do you think it should be more?
Somebody in 5
Do you,
years and then.
like, do you think 4 years sounds like a reasonable time period? Especially for Addison citizens
Right.
to hear that.
I don't know where 4 years came from.
It's the statute, right?
It's a statute.
I was sitting there watching it. 5,
4.
10, 4, 6, 4.
Okay. I assume that's where it came from. I don't see that. I mean, it's, in my opinion, the amount of years is really irrelevant. I'm putting a great faith in the new board to make decisions for the kids collectively. If that means we come up with a great scheme to change it, shake it up, and it benefits everybody, I don't care if that's 2 years or 10 years from now. Again, 4 years probably will appease some voters and make them feel a little more comfortable about it all. But again, I think that the new board, God help them, will,
Hopefully, that helps.
I think they will be tasked with coming up with that plan. And if they can sell it, if it's truly a great plan, it should be a non-issue.
Yeah.
If it really benefits everybody.
So, I mean, that's a great statement about what this is all about. So, thanks, Eugene, for that. And so the only question is, if we will get clarity on what the law says about it, because if it, basically, I think what they did is quote the law. But then, obviously, things take time. You're gonna have a new board that's getting created, figuring out what needs to happen, and 4 years goes by in a hurry.
Yes, it does.
Other things that ought to be included in any draft relative to school closure. So Eugene's suggesting that we include the language about the 4 years. Other comments? What about storage sheds? Just look at it this way. No, just, it was a joke. Go ahead, Kristen.
Well, are there any parameters around how the buildings, schools, whatever, can be used once they get sold? Like, I remember hearing somewhere down south where there was some language about the buildings could only be used for educational purposes, and the school district that consolidated was trying to use it for something else, and they couldn't, and their hands were tied because of what they'd written into the language.
I know in the Elmore, it speaks specifically to education of the students
Yeah.
within that district. And I think we could,
I think I read somewhere
Maintain
else
that.
it's like for public or
Yeah, one of these
community purpose.
Page
Post
9 in
sale, it
Chittenden
has to
East.
be-
Yeah,
Page 9 in Chittenden East says the conveyance of any of the above school properties shall be conditioned upon the town owning and utilizing the real property for community and public purposes for a minimum of 5 years. And then it goes on from there. So, but, I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
said. You could, and again, you can say other things if you want to. You can do whatever conditions you want to.
So
Jason?
this has to do with closing and the closing of the school within 4 years without the vote. But if the board decided to take a school like Addison and say, we're going to put the central office in that building and not use it actually as an elementary school, right? Does that need to be voted on, or is it considered that the school is still open?
That's a very good question. It's a very good question. I mean, I'm quite confident that if you use it for a school building, let's say you decided you're going to put all the third and fourth graders in the entire district at Addison, I think the board has, I would expect, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so I will do a double check on anything I tell you, but I think you could choose to use your facilities for schooling. Whether you could not have any kids there is another, it's an interesting question. We will find, I'll get the best read I can on that. Just
I mean, that's an extreme situation. I'm just wondering if the voters are looking at this and saying, all right, nothing is going to happen to our school in at least 4 years without our vote. That's not what this is saying. It's just saying it's not going to be used for something other than educational purpose.
Yeah,
For at least
that would be
4 years.
educational purpose, but the question is does that have to be schooling
Right.
for children? Yeah. Or like just say for admin.
So that's an interesting point, though. You're saying it doesn't, we're not going to close the school, but it may not be a K-6 school.
Right.
Right, so does the board have ultimate authority over that, or does it have to be a vote?
That's the question.
Item?
We will get the answer to that question. I'm quite confident that the new board will have the authority to use facilities for the education of children in the manner that makes the most sense. So I don't think you're bound to keeping this, there's nothing in the law that says you have to keep the same grades, same configuration, the same staffing or anything like that, but if you're going to close the school, you have to have voter approval.
I just want to make sure that that's clear to the voters when they're
Right.
reading that,
Right.
that that's what the
Right,
intent,
does there,
what that means.
would we want voter approval for a change in how they're currently being used? So if it became a magnet school for K through 3 who are interested in art, for example, if the definition of the school is changed, it's still educational, but it's going to be a different constituency, does that require a vote?
I'm quite confident, and again, I'll check it, I'm quite confident that the answer to that question is no, if it's being used for a school building. If you're going to close the school, I'm absolutely clear the first 4 years the voters have to approve it. What I'm not clear at all about is if the district chose to use it as the administrative headquarters with no kids being served, it starts getting, I would think, into gray territory, and we'll get the answer on that before the next one. Anything else about school closures that people want to add to this? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll keep going. Is there any means that we can put, while I have great faith in this new board, I also want to be sure that after 4 years is up, it's not just a ticking watch, that we exhaust all opportunities or all possibilities to maintain all schools. And by, just example, in one of these, it spoke of boundaries, town boundaries. So maybe some of the Waltham kids went to Addison, the Panton kids went to Addison, and it evened out the playing field. Can we add that sort of stuff so that way, again, if we come out of the gate with the hint that Addison's going to close, we're probably not going to get the support. But if we come out saying, we're going to look at all options and we're going to do our best to keep your building open, but if it fiscally doesn't make sense, then we inevitably have to make that hard line decision. I don't know how to word it. I don't know if it's possible, but and I don't want to tie the hands of the new board either. I absolutely don't want to do that, but.
Other perspectives on, Tracy, go ahead.
Page 11 of the Essex, I think this is the Essex one, they say that the Board of School Directors may adjust student enrollment based on individual circumstances and needs.
Which Essex is this?
Oh, sorry, this is the Article 17, of Essex Westford Education.
Essex Westford, got it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's Article 17. So we could put that in, saying, the board can adjust, and we talked about this at the community meeting where, with kids having to drive through Panton and Vergennes, kids from Ferrisburg have to drive through Panton and Vergennes to get to Ferrisburg. Maybe it makes more sense for them to pick a school that's closer geographically to them. So here at least they do have that, the option, the board does have the option to smooth out the population.
After a year.
After a year,
Yeah.
right. So that might be something worth adding in.
I like the wording of that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I do think if we start talking about boundaries and people are gonna freak out.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
I'm speaking of it in a context of
Down the
closing of a
road.
school.
Right, right, right.
I hear
right.
you, yeah, so, yeah.
It's a tough task to make all towns feel like we're looking at every angle. I respect that.
I think there's actually, I had this on the agenda for the next meeting, but we certainly are getting into it. There are a variety of approaches to the question of school choice. When I say school choice, or boundary realignment, or how you're going to manage facilities, staff, students, trying to get the most opportunity for your kids at a reasonable price. As a new board, you'll have to be able to look at all those things. And there are probably some other things you could put in the articles that would help bring some kind of guidance to that. But again, what you might want to do is think about sort of some statements of principle that will guide you in that regard. But clearly, that's the name. That's the name of this whole process: a unified approach to all the kids and the ability to be flexible. So it really, if you only define it as we may tell you that you need to start sending your kids to the Vergennes Union Elementary School because we just drew the line around the side of your house and now your kids have to go there. What they've done at Chittenden East is, at least for starters, is to say, they've opened up the choice conversation within the district. You can apply, or they've actually approached families that are within 5 miles of a particular school building and said, would you just as soon have your kids? And it's been managed flexibly as opposed to a new thing of drawing lines.
Right.
You don't need to decide those things now. In fact, you're not in a position to do it because we don't have the maps and you don't have you're not responsible for what's going to happen in the next year. But you could put in some principles or statements of intent to how you might see this going.
Help guide it, sure.
You help guide it,
Yeah.
yeah. So so that you're not locking your hands, but you're informing people about what kind of things you might be looking at. I think there's some of that in some of these articles. So it sounded like, let me just do a quick temperature check. It sounded like people kind of like the language in Article 17, or at least the issue that it's raising. So perhaps we could, for the next meeting, come in with a proposed draft language that you could look at and massage and expand. Okay, so anything else about school closure before we move on? Let's go on to the next one, which is school councils. At the last meeting, for those of you that weren't here, there was a general agreement that we ought to try to come up with have some proposed language for you. And has that been handed out?
Yes.
More important than the language is the principles or the concepts. And so let me just talk a little bit about it. And this is nothing I'm selling. One of the issues that I heard from this group early on and from the public meeting that you had was that people are very concerned about losing the ability to influence what's happening in their backyard, what's happening in their child's school. And when you have a board that has a larger scope, it becomes easier for that board to play its proper governance role because you're looking at things at a much higher level. but folks who live in each community want to be able to influence what happens for their children's education. So one of the things that's been debated in the legislature the last 4 years was whether to require the creation of school councils. There was draft language in several of the bills that have been considered in the last couple of years. It didn't end up being part of it. But there was a lot of testimony taken. The guy from Massachusetts, who does the school boards in Massachusetts, did a presentation for the committee talking about these councils. In 1993, the state of Massachusetts passed the Reform Act of 1993, the Education Reform Act, which is 20 years ago. But as you know, Massachusetts has the highest test scores, and their costs are about 20% less than Vermont's. So they did something right, and we've been down there to talk to them about what they did, and there's a number of elements of what they did. But one was when they did some governance changes, they also mandate school councils. And so my question to him was, tell me about school councils, and he said it's like anything else. If a local community is committed to it, and if a principal is committed to it, it's a great thing. And if people don't attend to it, it's not a great thing. It's one of those things that's just another meeting and so on and so forth. That's human nature. That's the way it is. The beauty of a debate on that subject here instead of in the State House is that if this is something you want to have happen, you can make a very strong statement about it. Your new board will have the relationship with the superintendent to say, we want this to happen, and these are the parameters for it, and you can have it happen, and the principals will understand this is really important, and it can happen. So what you have there is some bits and pieces from that I pulled together, and I did talk with Joanne about it a little bit. Some of these concepts, many of the concepts come out of the Massachusetts information that I've gotten. This language would say the new board will consider the creation of school councils. You could mandate it. This would basically say this is a task of the new board, but there's an intention that you do something like this. So the question is, do you like the concept, the general concept? Do you want to leave language like this that says this is going to be considered or it's recommended? Do you want to include requirement? And then anything else about the concepts that are in here that we should revise, that we should put into the next version of this? Some reactions in general.
I just have a question about the councils. So as I read it, it sounds like it would be like having a board for each school, again, except they have no official ability, but it still requires our principals and the superintendent to go to all those regular schedules.
It says the superintendent can attend if he or she chooses.
Right,
but it's really a principals advisory council, and it's really, it's not making policy, and it's not deciding how to spend money. It's really about the school building and the climate and the connections with parents, and about you see there's a list of some of the kinds of things, but you can go as big or as little as you want to, but it's got to be clear that it's not a policy making. It's not another board. It's a conversation around the table like that.
So would they meet? I'm just looking at it from the perspective as a unified council instead of it being the individual schools.
No, this language, and by the way, I'm not in any way selling this. This language would be a school council that is advising the principal. It's really designed to, because the board, some people perceive, in Vermont we have this crazy situation, I call it a crazy situation, where we have so many boards, and the SU board, and so on and so forth, and it's very easy for boards to get into a lot of operational stuff, because if you're in a very small district and your neighbor expects that you're going to fix the first grade teacher who yelled at their kid today and all that stuff, which really shouldn't be board work, but it becomes board work in Vermont. So the idea is if you have a somewhat broader responsibility as a board, you probably won't be dealing with as many nitty-gritty things as you do now in some instances, which is good. However, there's a lot of people in Vermont that are very concerned about losing the ability to have a voice in advising their principal in some structured way, not a policy way, but in an advisory way. That's why this has gotten so much play, okay?
I'm wondering if the school council as a concept is a way to address a couple things that we've talked about. One is the small funds, the Odyssey of the Mind, and those things. But I'm thinking about something like the Ferrisburg Garden. I mean, what's to prevent, I mean, the Ferrisburg, and I don't know of the other schools, this school I know about, they raise a lot of vegetables that are consumed in the school. At what point might the unified board say, well, great, we got squash, okay, we'll send some of it over here and some of it over there, and then pretty soon the parents in Ferrisburg are like, well, I really don't feel like working on the garden anymore because it just gets distributed. So I guess the concept of the school council is this a way that we can have individual schools say, here's our thing and we want to keep doing our thing? It's not big dollars, but it's our thing that we're proud of in our building, and same with the other schools, composting or what, getting parent volunteers engaged, and they don't have to come to the board meeting and it doesn't all have to be shared, but maybe is there a way that the council can be like, we'll just keep that at the school council level and that's okay with the board. You guys do what you want to do.
That local control.
Yeah. And so, and I don't know how to put that into words or an article, but that's kind of what I'm thinking that this is addressing, unless I'm going off in a different
You
direction.
could call the section "Keep Your Own Squash."
This is a volunteer, right? So
I'm
you're
sorry?
not, it's volunteer. So sort of
Yeah.
like. right,
Yes,
you're
it's not an
gonna be
elected
voting.
board, it's not an
elected,
elected policy
volunteer,
body,
right.
it doesn't have authority.
Right.
It's a structure that's designed to make sure there's a vehicle for community voice. with the
Right, which
principal.
could change from year to year.
And it would be
Right,
an
so that-
annual kind of thing. Each year,
Right.
there would be a putting together of a
Right.
committee. You could do, I mean, there's a lot more detail behind this, which I thought probably isn't appropriate for
Right.
articles, but if you were on the board and you're talking about, so then what are these things really gonna look like, and when do they have to be put together by, and how do you make sure that it actually happens? And those are details that the new board could.
Right, and they could wait a while if you will consider them.
Right.
It doesn't, as they're being formed and everything, it might be too much for them to do immediately and just,
Yeah, it depends on how
Yeah.
strongly you feel about it, whether you want to sort of put it out there as a consider or an expectation. Yeah,
Can
go
I
ahead.
just make a comment? What I don't want to see happen is that the principals now have to go to more meetings in the
Right.
evening when they have a lot of student
Right.
activities. And of course, we want them at the student activities, so is there a way that we could find a way where the PTO could exist if it's necessary to have a school council, and that's really up to you, but let's overlay that to the other nighttime commitments of the principals at the current time.
And actually, my question is, I'm trying to figure out what this group would do differently than the PTO.
Right.
What's-
Good question.
I was struggling with the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I was a member of the PTO at Virgins for a while, and I've been away from it for a while, so things may have changed. But what we didn't talk about was curriculum, and that was an area that I am the most concerned with and have interest in. And in PTO, I wasn't able to do that, and so that's an area that I know a lot of parents are concerned about, but don't know where to voice their concerns or get involved with curriculum. And so if this is an area that the school and the principal would be open to, then I can see a lot of interest in that. But otherwise, it is hard to know. I really like this idea a lot, and I think it addresses that loss of control that is an anxiety issue for a lot of people. But it really would be the principal to be the one to make it happen. I think they have to embrace it and make it
Right,
work.
and I mean, the board could expect of the superintendent and the principals that it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's like everything else it's all about the leadership and the people. But the question is, could there be overlap? You could, in setting up a requirement for councils, you could say the parent representatives are selected by the PTO. I mean, you can do it however you want to. So you could, by design, say, if you've got a PTO or if you've already got a committee, you could substitute, you can substitute it. This concept was you'd have teachers, parents, some citizens who come with different kinds of perspectives, and in the high school, you'd have a couple kids. Yeah, no,
I'm assuming that there's no statute about school councils.
there is none yet. I
So
wouldn't be surprised.
So if the articles were absolutely silent relative to school councils, the big board has the authority, they have the authority
Sure,
to
they
create
can always
that,
create
okay?
it.
So I don't really see any advantage of having this in our articles because you really don't have enough information. Somebody says, well, what's this school council gonna do? How's it set up, how's it work, whatever. You don't have any of that information, so I think that you're opening up, dialogue that really doesn't occur. The other thing, if you have it in your articles, one of the things I'm concerned is that if you have it in your articles and you adopt this school council, and if they're appointed by, I'd be concerned if they became a public body. I understand they don't have any, they don't have the checkbook,
You're
they don't have
right.
any governance, but I'm concerned
Good caution.
with a appointed body that is now subject to the open meeting law, minutes, agendas, staff time, all this type of thing. I'm not wild about that. That's why I think I was the only one at the last meeting that says, Dave, you want to look at this? I said, yeah. Anybody doesn't want to look into it? Yeah, it was me. I didn't want to look at it because I looked at this as being the road to, I understand there's some advantages. I understand that, but I think the road to inefficiencies, because it's like we're trying to get rid of the number of boards and have the superintendent's office be more efficient. And I just see this as, when I weigh it up,
Could be a
I don't
slippery
like
slope.
it. Yeah.
Excellent observation, and it's what you want to guard against. And the flip side is that there are people who say a larger district loses the personal
Yeah,
connection.
Steve, let me, in just conclusion, I'm a task force guy.
Yeah.
Just so that everybody in the room
That's
knows
all
this,
done.
okay? I love task forces. Got a problem, create a task force, get your most talented people, solve it. I love those things, all right? I'm not in love with perpetuating committees
Committees and boards,
with
yeah.
not clear mission, not clear whatever. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Excellent, very legitimate perspective. Excellent. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, I guess to echo what Mel is saying, but also to bring up a point that I brought up about a different article last time, is that I think in general, whether it's school councils or students moving, I don't think that we should get in a position where we are putting anything into the board's hands. I mean, I don't feel like that's what this body was created for, nor are we the people to be deciding that. And I know that our one public member commented about putting, last time, commented about putting anything that we really want in here, but I don't think that we have the time to give any of these things enough thought. And if we're just to recommend something doesn't make any sense to me either. Like, what is the point of putting this in here? Just like, hey, this is an idea we had. We're just gonna throw it out there, it's a great idea. Should we use that as a selling point of possibilities when we're talking to the public? Sure. Should it be in this that's voted on? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, a couple more comments, and then we'll take a little bit of a poll there to see where we are.
I mean, I agree, less is more, and this may be something that it overlaps a lot with the PTO, as Tracy said, and it may just bubble up naturally. People will figure out how to do this, but I guess my concern is at the community meeting, at least one of the things that I kept hearing over and over is how do we make sure that we can keep our school community as it is and keep the things that make it special? And I think we've got to spend a little time just trying to come up with, just answer that question anyway. And if there isn't anything and we say the unified district's going to decide everything and we can't guarantee what's going to happen at any individual school building, that's the answer, but that doesn't address that, and it was a big deal to a lot of people that came to the
Yeah.
forum. And you'll probably hear it again at the next two.
Yep. Well, that was where this came from, so excellent
Yeah.
comment. Any last comments before we try to take a poll?
I guess I'd just throw out there that the creation of school councils as an article in this demonstrates that we're trying to bridge that gap between, the loss of local control. I agree with you. I don't think it makes sense to say we may do this. I say we either do it or we don't do it, because it's just too loosey-goosey then. And how important is it
But
for unification?
one thing here, I mean, we are all overcommitted. as it is. I mean, it's the same people on the PTO as the same people on the school boards. It's the people who want to be committed are committed, and maybe should be committed. But the point is, if we put into the articles that these have to be there, then we are really tying the hands. What if a future community doesn't have anyone who will volunteer? Does that mean that that community is going to be penalized because they're not meeting up to the articles?
2% tax penalty.
Right, I agree with Jason and David. I don't want to require anyone to do this. If people are interested, and I think we're all very interested in our schools, we're going to find a way to have that voice, whether it's through the PTO, and maybe the PTO just gets a little bit more focused on, and expands to curriculum. So I think these things are going to happen, and we'll bring it up at the community meetings, but I really don't want to tie anyone's hands.
I have a suggestion on this one. It seems to me there's three choices. One is we try to work with this language, maybe make it more affirmative or definitive, say we're going to have school councils. A second option is be silent on it completely, leave it out so we don't sort of get into the whole thing if we're not ready to. And the third option would be to have some kind of a statement of intent. A statement of intent would not be like, no, you might want to think about school councils. It could be a statement of intent that it is the intent of this new unified union school to create local opportunities for local communities to interact with their school buildings, whether it be through councils, task forces, tangible, maybe refer to tangible vehicles for connecting with parents and community members. So in other words, we're not just saying, now there's this new unified union school district and we sort of don't care about that other piece of it. You could make some kind of statement. Now, it may be too fuzzy and you may decide not to do it, but I see that as the third option. So,
I like that.
Did you
third
read
option
Article
you said.
18 in here? Because it sort of says that.
Which one?
Essex, it says.
Is this Elmore or who?
Essex.
Essex.
About
Okay.
providing opportunity for local input on policy and budget development.
Oh, okay, there it is right there.
Yeah.
Which article?
Article 18,
Article
page
18.
11.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, it says policy and budget development, so that seems like an article of intent to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my suggestion. If we could just see a quick show of hands on those three options, either go for sort of mandated school councils is number one, do nothing, leave it, be totally silent is number two, and try to fashion some kind of a statement of intent for consideration. By the way, each time we decide on a general direction, we'll put it in the next draft, but ultimately you're going to have to vote on this whole package. So of those three options, how many people like the idea of something pretty affirmative about councils? How many people think we should be silent on the councils? And how many, so we got two, and how many people feel we should at least work with a statement of intent on the goal that drove the council's language? All right, so, I mean, basically, people are still liking the idea of some kind of statement of intent, and obviously the proof will be in the, whether it makes it through will depend on whether people like it when it gets.
I mean, it makes more sense, it makes more sense to me to say that the board will, something to address the school's individual nature, or to keep their identity or something like that, but not get into how they need to do that. Just like at any board meeting.
So this
you
language.
need to have, this talks about policy and stuff like that.
Right, but you could massage that. But so it's a mandate to the new board, but it's a pretty wide open.
Yeah, you
mandate.
say to your school board, we have an issue with communication between parents and teachers. I'm not going to tell you how to resolve that. I'm just saying it's an issue that needs to be seen. It's up to you, the principal, and the teachers to figure out how it's going to be resolved.
Okay, so we will do a draft before the next meeting that would be, I'm going to call it a wide open mandate, but it will be a directive to the new board, but the directive will be to try to achieve an objective, there won't be a specific strategy built into it.
Article 14 in Elmore Morristown also speaks to that. I'd like to just point out, I struggle with associating this with loss of local control because control's a farce for this group, for this school council. It's not really control. It'd be an
That's right.
advisement board or, you know.
It's influence,
It's
community
definitely,
influence.
yeah, it's not of any sort of control. What it potentially does offer us is for, say, I'll use Addison for an example. It gives us local flavor and input to the school, and it might help. Listen, we're all humans, and we all love change, just given human nature. There's a lot of concerned citizens. My suspicion is, for the first 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to get a lot of support. After that, oh, it's really not changed. This is great. Things are going good. It's probably going to take a downtick, and you'll have less of that. Unfortunately, you're going to still have us committed
No,
folks.
you're right, I agree.
But it'll help us gain that support we need for this.
Okay. So it's going on quarter of. There are maybe 3 or 4 other article type things that we need to talk about at the next meeting. We'll have these drafts that you can look at. And then I am hoping by then, I'm just, thinking about the timing of all this because of the time. We will try to have some language, that's only next week, isn't it?
It's next week, Steve.
Tuesday, 6 days from now.
Right.
We will try to have the beginnings of some language for you that begin to address the big why do this question. And it's about education, and the next meeting will be all about the educational benefits, and to have a conversation about that, because there needs to be a compelling statement about that. If there isn't, it's a long conversation, the future conversation is a tough one. So that's number one. We will try to have for you next week the beginning of the financial description, a narrative that would go with Ed's documents, which would begin to, because how we interpret the financial piece is important, and we need to have that conversation further. We didn't talk about it all that much detail last week. And then we also need to have in writing a piece on transparency and accountability, which I know is a sensitive issue here. And we're going to have a conversation about that as well. We won't have a draft on that probably for next week, but we will need to address that issue before we get done with this conversation. I want to make sure, Chris, that we had time, because there are people who wanted to comment for any public input. So maybe, let me just ask, any further comments on anything we've talked about this evening? Okay, so we're getting close on sort of what will end up in articles. The big issue will be, is the narrative about this compelling, and then you're going to need to make a decision about, are you ready to recommend moving forward as with your public or not? And that decision really needs to be made probably by whatever that meeting is we set, the 10th of December or whatever, is when you really need to make that decision. Okay, so.
Do we have any public comments, questions, concerns? Jill?
I'm Jill Bourgeois. I live in the town of Addison. I have 2 kids who attend the high school here. This is the first time I've been to one of these meetings. And so you guys are like in the early stages of getting the articles together. So I'm sorry if someone has previously asked this question and I wasn't here to hear the answer. But my question is, as you guys put these articles together and you firm up, how is the new board held within the constraints of these articles that you're putting together? Is it very harsh, or do you just have to kind of stay within the guidelines? That's the question.
I could take a shot at it, and
Sure,
if
Steve.
other folks have opinions, feel free to jump in. The articles will be, obviously, they're voted on by the voters, so they have a lot of weight. I mean, they will, but there's a limit as to what they define. They define the fact that you're going to have I don't know if you saw the draft that was, if you didn't see a draft, you probably should get a copy. Did you have a draft?
I have a draft of tonight's.
Yeah, it's tonight's version, but it says this is what the new district is, this is how it's going to be governed, this is how the board is made up. This is how property gets handled, this is, you know, all the stuff we talked about tonight. And then the new board is responsible for making sure that all the kids in the region get a great education at the best possible price for taxpayers. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. Now, I don't know, did you have something particular in mind that you were concerned about?
No, my question is, you know, you guys are going through all of this work and concerned about, you know, let's do this positively for the community and make sure that, you know, everyone, we're all kind of looking on the same page. But once you put these together, and if it gets passed, is the new board going to say, well, we're the board and this is what we're doing? They are held within the limits of these articles. They have to follow them, is my question.
Yes, it's binding. I mean, you know, some articles are more specific than others. Some of them we're just putting in here as intent, but it's legally binding.
So the public will actually vote on the articles themselves, not just, yes, we want to do it, and we like your ideas, or no, we're not doing it. They're actually voting on the articles.
They'll vote on the articles that we have been discussing. There will be a report that you actually vote on.
But in total.
In total,
It's a yes vote or a no vote.
It's not a line item.
Yes for this one and no for this one.
Right.
Yeah, you'd be adopting the set of articles or not, basically.
All right, that answers my question.
Was there any particular, is there a particular area that you're concerned about that the committee should be thinking about?
No, because I think you guys are still, like, some of these, you're still pretty early on in your articles. So that was really I mean, you guys sound like you're really putting a lot of thought into them and consideration into the sensitivities of the public or what might have been their sensitivities in the past. So, no, I think you guys are doing a good job. Thank you for your time and commitment, because I've been on the board before and I realize it is a lot of time and commitment, so thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Michelle, Jeff? This, unless there's any other questions or comments?
Please.
So I was thinking about different ways to continue to get information out to folks, and I had a meeting actually with RETN this week. And so I'd like to produce a kind of an informal video of like a conversation with a couple of board members and myself and Steve Dale. So I'm looking for some volunteers that wouldn't mind participating in this informal kind of dialogue conversation so that we can get it out there as another piece of information on our website and through the local cable access. So don't all raise your hand at once.
Well, I have the 2005 video if you want to use that.
Were you starring in that?
My kids are on.
Let's trot them out again.
Molly was 3.
I think that was the phone,
The new version.
So anyone that has any interest in doing that, please get in touch with Joanne.
Joanne, I'd like to do that sometime on the 23rd or 24th of November. We can be really flexible around the time. So I'd really love it if someone could, 2 of you could step forward and help us out with that. It will be fun, I promise.
Other communication around that subject?
Yeah, the other communication, we're working on a brochure that will go out to all community members. We've been getting some feedback still that this information is not getting out, so we're going to do a broad-based mailing like we do for the budget and give people some resources and places to go and find that information. And then I don't know if we're going to bring up the thought around, what I will be asking each of the boards in your next board meeting is to seriously think about stepping up and running for the new board. I think it's not too early for us to be thinking about that, and it really would go to Jill's concern and question, if we had some consistent people making the transition, should we be successful with the unification? So please think about that.
Good point. The language, if you read the language of the articles, there's one that's quite specific about the election of the board members for the new entity, which have to be elected on the same day, March 1st, which means that the petitions have to be filed 30 days in advance, between 30 and 40 days in advance, whatever it is, which means that people have to start thinking about, should be thinking about this in December. And in fact, you'll be thinking about it before the actual before the Board of Education would take any action if you decide to submit it to them. So we're only mentioning this is because there won't be, once you've decided you want to move forward, there'll be a couple of weeks before a week before the holidays or something, a couple of weeks before the holidays, and then you're into January, and it's good to be thinking about it in advance.
So maybe you could just remind folks what they would need to do to get on a ballot for election.
There's probably people in this room that know all the details
Yeah.
about that.
Joanne, does that mean that
Mel, you want to
some
tell
board
what
members
there's
could
it's written in
possibly
our
be running for
articles.
two boards? Okay.
Thank you.
Every clerk has their own form. It's not complicated, and the number of signatures needed is based on the number of people on your checklist. It's 1% of your checklist. So if it's somebody in Virginia, you need 16 or 17. Ferrisburg may 18. I believe it's the fifth Monday before the election, which I think does fall into his 30 to 40. But the formula is, I think it's fifth Monday prior to town meeting day at 5 p.m.
Does that mean that?
But I think what's important is that if you're going to do this, typically, it's common for clerks to have a sheet of all of the offices that are planned, that are open. And it's just, it's typical that includes school board members, city council, select board members, water district commissioners. It's the whole sheet. So
we should be letting them know that this is happening once you've decided that you're going to recommend that it happen, because this is an entity that hasn't existed before. So, should they be notified that there will actually be election of individuals? Or does that happen when this gets put on the ballot?
Well, I think there's a timing issue here. This committee is going to come up with a report, and I'm assuming they're going to report to the Addison Northwest Supervisory Board. Who are we delivering this to?
So this committee is delivering it to the State Board of Education.
Okay.
So actually to the State Department on the 6th of January.
Okay.
Whatever the outcome is, you'll present it on the 6th. It gets considered by the State Board on the 19th of January.
Yeah, okay.
But your boards, four boards, need to weigh in on it at your carousel meeting on the 16th of December. I would say by the 16th of December, I assume you will have decided whether you're going forward, and you will be moving toward finalizing the report to get it voted on the 5th of January. So people should begin to think about board membership. We had a whole conversation with people about whether this can all happen, whether people can actually run for an office that's not yet been created. But this entire process assumes that you're going to be having, people who have had, you guys, you've had two unsuccessful votes in the past, and there were people actually on the ballot to be elected to a board that didn't yet exist. So we were assured that this timing sequence is not a problem, that in fact people should could begin to get their petitions even before the state board has had its action.
And if you're in a town with multiple seats, you have to talk to your other people, because there's actually a separate petition for the 1-year term, the 2-year term, the 3-year term. So we've had situations where we've had an uncontested race for one term and then 2 people running for another term. So it's talk to each other in your towns.
And I'm assuming you will still be operating your regular school board for another year, another 15 months.
And some of those people.
And some of those people will be up for election this year as well. So some people will be running to finish out the current arrangement. So it'll get complicated, but
so this committee is submitting a report to the state?
To the State Board of Education.
This committee doesn't report to?
It does not.
Okay, we submit, we're duly appointed, got that part correctly,
Yep.
and we send that to the state, and they are required to review and approve.
They have to approve it, and it's largely a legal review. It's largely to
Okay.
make sure that we're not doing something that's not supposed to be done.
Okay. And is it the case that they either are good, they don't have the right to change the articles?
They could reject the articles and tell you had to change something, but we're going to prevent that by virtue of sending them a draft by the 15th of December, and if there's some problem, they're going to let us know well in advance so we could change it in the next 3 weeks. But I'd be shocked if there were surprises.
Yeah. It's just a real narrow,
It's a very narrow window.
It's a 5-day window for people running for office, because, sure, you can fill out a petition, but you don't file it until there actually is such a office.
Yes.
Okay? And that determination is, that period of time is only 5 or 6 days, based on what you
Might be a
said
week,
to me.
yeah, it's 19th, yeah, the 19th of January.
Yeah,
is
and
when
whatever
they
the,
will-
yeah, and
But,
whatever the fifth Monday is before town meeting day, it's gonna be the 26th or 7th or
Yeah.
whatever it is of January.
Yeah.
There's just a real narrow
Yeah.
window there.
Yeah, there is, that's right. Okay, I'm sorry, you were asking for any other?
If there's no other public comment, this
So,
meeting,
Next
yes,
Tuesday, right?
next Tuesday.
Okay.
This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.